welcome to your access point to Washington. I'm Ayesha Tanzeem. Foreign direct investment fell by a whopping 67% during the first quarter of the new fiscal year in Pakistan. Why are dollars and euros running away from Pakistan, and how do we stop them in their tracks? We'll find out from a panel of experts that include in our Washington studios Dr. Zubair Iqbal of the Middle East Institute, who's the former IMF Assistant Director of the Middle East and Central Asia. We also have from Karachi via Skype Mr. Asif Saad, the CEO of a Korean conglomerate, Lotte. They have invested big time in Pakistan and they're still looking for more. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
We start with you. Well, welcome, Asad, and we start with you, Mr. Iqbal. Why such a big drop, 67%?
It shouldn't be a surprise at all. Let me get through the axioms that determine foreign direct investment in any country. Foreign direct investment is a function of several things. One of the most important ones is the rate of growth. Higher the growth rate, the more the foreign direct investment inflow. Similarly, if better the external position, more you would have a foreign direct investment coming into the country. Third, depends upon the domestic policy stance. If the domestic policy stance is friendly, yes, capital inflows will move in. And the fourth, which is very interesting for developing countries in particular, if foreign assistance, official foreign assistance is increasing, then foreign direct investment also increases. Now, as far as Pakistan is concerned, it does not meet any of the characteristics or inputs that are required to promote foreign direct investment. Growth is not picking up. In fact, at this moment, growth is at 3%, which is somewhat 4 percentage points below the potential rate of growth. Its external position is incredibly bad, which means that no investor would be willing to come in.
Okay, so you're describing all the problems that we already know.
Yes.
Security is bad, growth is bad, we've had, floods, we haven't recovered, etc., etc., etc. And yet we have you here, Asad, Mr. Asad, who's I'm sorry, Mr. Saad, I don't know why I messed up. You belong to a company.
It's Asif Saad.
Yes, Asif Saad. And you're working with a company that's investing in Pakistan and wanting to invest more. What is it that you think happening in the economy that you guys want to be there and the others don't?
I think it's not a case of the others don't. I think if you want to evaluate Pakistan's investment climate and regime at this point, you have to look at what has been the background of the country and what kind of situation it has faced in the past and where we are today. I think purely as an investor, as a foreign investor in Pakistan, our group looks at some key fundamentals, and those fundamentals have to do with the demographics of the country, the location, the geopolitical location, the fact that it has a young population, it's a growing population, the fact that there is so all these things actually bode well for the future, and anybody who is looking to invest today and is going to be there as a long-term player can reap the results when the country goes through this evolution and finally comes out of its trouble spots which we see today. So I think nobody's running away from Pakistan. It's the fact is that international companies like ourselves, both European, Asian, if you look at their returns of investment and you compare it, because it's all relative, you have compare it to the region and see the return of investments available in countries like India, in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka. Pakistan is not far behind. In fact, I won't be surprised if Pakistan is actually is a little better than some of these countries.
So that's an argument.
If the returns...
Yes, Asif Saad, Mr. Saad, that's an argument I often hear from successful businessmen in Pakistan like that. And I want to ask Dr. Iqbal, where is then this gap? On one side, you say nothing is working. And on the other side, we have successful businesses who want to invest more in Pakistan, not just Pakistani money, Korean money, the the reals, there are the euros, there are the dollars. Why is the equation not matching?
Well, see, looking at the micro level, yes, there can be some isolated cases of success stories which will attract investments from abroad because there is a particular function to be performed by that. However, if you're looking at it from a macro point of view, the overall of the economy, it doesn't bode well for various reasons. See, one of the most important axioms underlying foreign direct investment is that foreign direct investment goes only to the countries where domestic investment is rising. If domestic investment is not rising, no foreign investor is likely to go there in big number, especially in a sustained fashion. That's not happening in Pakistan. I agree that there are certain isolated areas where it is possible, where particular investment is fed into a chain which meets the needs of the primary investor from abroad. However, it's the domestic investment that carries the ball. Foreign investor comes in only if domestic investment is taking place. Overall, from the broader point of view of the economy, that's not what's happening. So you have to look at it from that context. There can be isolated success stories. I'm not against that. I'm not denying that. But that doesn't mean that the whole picture is a good one.
So, okay, so let's get to the isolated. Are you an isolated case? Asif, are you an isolated?
I don't think so. I think if you look at, I don't want to particularly talk about my company. Yes, we've been very successful ever since we've come to Pakistan. But companies who have stayed here, European companies, American companies who've been around 40 years, 50 years, have always managed to make very decent returns in the country. Yes, I agree with Zubair Saab that this is domestic investment is important. When you talk about investment, it has to be overall investment. It can't just be foreign direct investment. But sir, if the overall investment climate wasn't good, people would not be investing at all. Whereas the fact is that in Pakistan, if you look at the domestic sectors like textile, you look at anything which has to do with the retail trade, you look at the consumer businesses, domestic groups have been investing. There have been capacity enhancement, there have been capacity increases, and why not? Look at the market. Pakistan today is a 200 million man market, people market. It's not a small country by population. Yes, in terms of disposable income, it's not really up there as yet, but the investment is in line with the country's capacity to and the demand. So I think it's only a matter of time that more capacity will come in from both domestic and foreign investors, and it is coming in. Unilever, let me just put you one specific company that I know about. I think it was last year or the year before that the profits that they declared and they repatriated were the highest in the world from Pakistan. And that's a consumer market. They sell.
So then here's a question from you, and I think Dr. Iqbal might want to chime in a little later. But what I want to ask you is, you say the market's working, it's giving good return, one of the highest returns in the region, if not one of the highest, at par with countries in the region, and yet we see FDI falling. Who are these companies that are leaving, or who are these companies that have looked at Pakistan and said, we don't want to go in? Do these numbers mean anything to you?
I don't think this percentage means much. I think the macro level that Dr. Zubair was describing a bit earlier is actually more important. These percentages, in 1 month, if it's 67%, I won't be surprised if next month it's either 20 or positive 20. You have to. I'm not so sure what they looked at, what that 67% actually represents, but. Yes, there is a general sentiment, a negative sentiment. And I think let's come back to where you started from, Ayesha, that there is this negative sentiment about Pakistan, there is a negative impression about Pakistan. And why not? Look at the troubles that the country is in, in all sorts of ways. So that doesn't surprise one. And when you look at it as from particularly sitting in New York or Washington or London as an investor, you'd be saying, I don't want to be doing business, forget it. I don't want to be in that country.
Or in Japan, I was reading that Japanese are saying, well, we'd love to invest in Pakistan, but we are scared.
Exactly.
I'm sure you...
But those that are here, those who take that step and take that, let me say, bold step to come here, they are always nicely surprised. I am I am a member of the Overseas Chamber of Investors in Karachi, and let me assure you, this is the most sort of things that we hear from people who come into Pakistan, companies who come into Pakistan for the first time. They say, what we read in the papers, what we see in the press outside is completely different to when we come here and what we see.
What you
Here's
experience.
a market
okay.
that.
So let me ask you, Dr. Iqbal, is this just a case of misperception, bad rep?
No, I think the numbers don't lie.
Okay.
The numbers are very simple and straightforward. You got a fiscal deficit as large as 7.5% of GDP. You have a balance of payments position which is getting worse. Your foreign exchange position is getting weaker. And then on top of it, you've got a massive youth bulge, huge amount of population, which is not likely to get employment unless the growth rate goes up. And for that growth rate to go up, you have to have investment level of at least 20% to 25% of GDP. You have at this moment less than 12%. And then on top of it, domestic savings are continuing to fall, which is reflected by what's happening to the budget. Because of that, I don't see any rational investor who is looking at it and thinking and worrying about the long-term prospects for returns on that investment. Look, let's face it, we keep pretending that the problem isn't there. The problem isn't going to go away. It's going to remain. So it's a good idea to face up to these problems and force the government, which is totally dysfunctional at this moment, to face up to it and do something about it.
Now, the government we're not bringing in because, as you say, the government hasn't been able to do anything until now. I don't know what they might be able to do. We were going to have the Planning Commission and Secretary of Finance in this program, and they actually committed. For technical reasons, we couldn't connect. Let me go to our Facebook page. There's some comments there that I want to share. There's one comment that Mr. Asad left. I don't know his last name. And the whole comment is about how what we call the brain drain. He's saying the problem with Pakistan is everybody's leaving, in his words, selling their skills for the dollar. You'd rather go and drive a cab in New York or Washington than work in Pakistan. How much is brain drain a problem?
No. It's not a problem. There is an excess capacity, and that's the reason why the brain drain is taking place. It's a normal case.
No, but is there an excess capacity that's trained and that's educated to fulfill the demands of the sector? Of
skilled positions, yes. The problem is with the semi-skilled and with the technical levels. That's where the shortages exist. As far as the market is concerned, yes, their skills are available and they can be used. And the reason why they're not being used in the country is because there's no demand for them. And the return clearly is higher abroad. Makes sense for them to move out of the country. I have no problem with that. Because if you have domestic investment taking place, these people will come back.
Okay, so let's get to Karachi. Yeah, go ahead.
On the ground, the reality is that when you go and, as somebody is running a business, when we go and try and find good people in Pakistan, it's very difficult to get good people. So we are losing people. We are losing people not just to immigration. We're just losing people to job opportunities and mega increases in the salary levels especially when they move to Middle East. But let me say this, that over the last couple of years, and I think the situation in the Western world is probably the reason for this. There have been people coming back and looking at Pakistan as the place they come back to. Yes, it's home, but it's also because the economic situation in the US and European Union is not that great. So it's not really, they can't go out. They don't have those opportunities anymore. So I think there's a bit of a reversal in that trend.
Okay, now this is what I want to ask you, because you're facing these things day in, day out. I want to ask you, I'm an investor sitting in Europe or America or Middle East, wherever. I look at Pakistan, I look at my life may be in danger. I may go out, get robbed or mugged. There'll be no electricity. If I put up a factory, how am I going to run it? How do you deal with these issues?
Well, look. Again, with the press, the stories that you read in the press, yes, a lot of it are true. But one thing that we know of is that most of these incidents that happen in a very targeted way. Yes, there are crime has to be broken down, and you see that there is street crime, and I think that that sort of troubles the ordinary citizen more than anything else. But other things, these stories that you hear of fires and killings and kidnappings.
So that's more targeted. Okay, so
targeted.
I'm more curious about electricity. How do you run anything, a factory, even a computer, when you don't get electricity? How do you overcome this? And how do you overcome it in your group?
Well, you have to have. Look, it's not easy. I'm not sitting here and saying that things are easy here. Energy is a major issue. Energy is a problem, and whatever demand there is, whatever capacity there is for various production units, it's underutilized because of energy issues. So most people have dual or triple, fuel alternatives for energy. I mean, we run a factory which is connected on the public network. We have a gas generation, self-generation power plant. We're connected to the loop on the national WAPTA network. So you try and create a system whereby if one fails, you go to the other. That fails, you go to the other. So unfortunately, that is the reality, and I won't be speaking the truth if I didn't admit it. Yes. Energy is the biggest problem.
So basically what you do is you have lots of backup plans. You don't have just a backup. You have backup A, backup B, backup C. And that may be a good strategy for any business, no matter what kind of problems you have. What I want you to ask Dr. Iqbal is, here's a businessman. He's not just talking about himself. He's talking about a whole lot of other businesses that he sees springing up around him, but also is giving examples of companies that have been around for 30, 40 years, still doing well, not going anywhere. Putting more money in Pakistan. I'm wondering if you were advisor to them, would you tell them to take their money out of Pakistan?
Look, I don't have to tell them. Okay. The market determines what will happen because there are 120 other countries where they don't have this problem. The question then is, would they come to Pakistan under the current circumstances or not? Maybe they're not willing to leave because they've been there and they're comfortable, they're working the system very well, and they're fine.
And nobody wants to, jeopardize their life.
The question is new ones. Will the new investments come in under the circumstances where he's right about saying, look, we have to compare with investment opportunities elsewhere and the returns elsewhere. If 120 other countries don't have the same problems as Pakistan, why would they come to Pakistan? The point, therefore, is you must fix those constraints. You must fix those problems.
Absolutely.
See, that's what
they need to be fixed.
Okay, so here's
these problems exist. This is not correct that there are no problems in other countries. I mean, investors who've gone to India, which is a much bigger market, much better organized, so they say, things work in India. But investors have pulled out of India, I think, at a faster rate than they've gone in, but they've pulled out also, going there and getting disappointed. Our group is a major investor in China, for example, and I'll tell you the story about China. It's easy to get in, it's easy to, it may be easier to set up and do business, but the returns in China are absolutely dismal. It's very difficult to make money in China, even though you get an infrastructure that works and volumes and production capacities which are much bigger. So
is it because there's a lot of competition?
Investor is looking for a return of the money. There is a lot of competition. The labor is expensive. China has energy issues. India has energy issues. There are corruption issues. Look. So when you talk about foreign investment in a particular country, I think you have to look at what it's competing with and what it is up against. I completely agree with Dr. Zubair that there are massive problems in Pakistan. Absolutely no hiding that fact. But I think when you look at it relatively, it's still. We were looking at putting up a plant recently in Saudi Arabia, and when our company looked at Saudi Arabia and they started talking to this group that we were considering joining up with, the stories from these people kept changing once, twice, thrice, and then we realized that the law of the land is really there's no law of the land.
There's no law of the land.
Actually, just a decree.
Although to a foreigner, they might say the same for Pakistan, and you might just be more used to Pakistan because you grew up there.
But Ayesha, that's what it is. In Pakistan, if you buy property, let's look at if you buy property in Pakistan, it's very likely, that that property is going to, let's say, personal property, that's going to be inherited and then inherited, and it's going to go on because the private property is protected by law, and good or bad, but in this way it works. So when we come in here, so the foreign investor coming in here buying property has no examples of there being any failure on that account. Number two, he comes and he can own 100% of his business. He doesn't have to get into forced joint ventures with all kinds of shady people. They can repatriate money as and when they want. I mean, the amount of dividends that people have taken away from Pakistan, it goes miles in showing that the investment is good, and it can be brought out as and when they want.
It can give return. Now, here's my other question, and this is a question totally for the common people who don't invest on this scale. What happens when the foreign direct investment falls? What does it mean for a country?
Well, I mean, it basically means that the overall investment has fallen. When the overall investment falls, growth slows down. When the growth slows down, income inequality increases and inflationary pressures start to build up. And that basically means that your external position is going to get worse and your domestic position is going to get worse. When that happens, you're back to a situation where macroeconomic imbalances develop and grow.
And so give me an example of a similar country, not of Pakistan, a similar country that overcame this problem. How do you overcome?
Oh, Brazil is a very major example. Turkey is a major example. In the case of Brazil, which was largely dependent upon foreign investment for its growth for a considerable period of time, certainly after 1998-99 crisis in Asia, there was a dramatic reduction. And Brazil contracted by 6.5% to 7% in 1 year. The economy.
And what did they do?
And they realized the situation, they woke up to it, and then a dramatic change in economic policy took place, whereby government spending was reduced, taxation system was modernized and worked out, restrictions on inflow of capital or outflow of capital were eliminated, and they adjusted their exchange rate. Okay. At the same time, they allowed the workers to be subject to market forces. The result was dramatic. Within 5 years, after 1998, Brazil reached a situation where now it is the 10th largest country in the world, economy in the world, and it's growing at the rate of about 7.5% a year. There's a major transformation, and you can have the same transformation taking place in Pakistan. There's no reason why it shouldn't.
Is it? Are there any indications? Mr. Asif Saad?
About? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Some of the things that he mentioned, that the government has to do, changes in policy as a businessman. When you approach the government with some of your suggestions or your problems, how are you received?
Of course, the government has to change policies. Of course, there are massive issues in policy making, not just implementing any kind of reform. But a lot of these things that Dr. Zubair just mentioned, which happened in Turkey, have actually happened in Pakistan over the last 10, 15 years. There's been a huge reform of the banking and the financial sector. There's been a huge reform in the trade policies. Pakistan today is a much more open market for both import and export, trading very, very openly with all its trading partners. Yes, it has a regional problem. Even that is being sorted. You must have heard these days there's a big drive in both India and Pakistan to open trade. And as foreign investors in Pakistan, our group certainly looks forward to the day when we trade openly with India, because what that does is it gives to us a huge market, a billion-plus population in India, and we can sit here in Pakistan and supply, and vice versa. So it's actually, these things are happening. There is reform happening, but we have to be patient with Pakistan. We can't expect the kind of problems we've had in the past, the kind of political economy that we've had.
Since you mentioned India, let me just throw in this question. As a businessman, how do you respond to those who say, but the market in Pakistan will be flooded with Indian goods, local industry will die, local companies won't be able to compete, therefore we shouldn't open it?
I mean, this is a classic case of whenever you open markets, and when the European Union was becoming a single market, Germany and France had this same sort of thing, and I think it's a matter of time when people and markets adjust. There are things that Pakistan produces which We have much better quality than India. We have more of certain products, strengths in certain sectors, which I don't think it's going to go away. India has strength in certain sectors, and when they come into our markets, it will be for those products for which there is demand here.
So basically, you just compete. Right. Go ahead. I'll just bring in.
And the beneficiary is Pakistan because it's the bigger market.
Bigger market.
We get the bigger market.
Okay, let me just bring in Dr. Iqbal. How much difference will it make if today the trade with India opens?
Oh, it's significant,
100%.
very significant, and we will be the beneficiaries. I don't think that this fear that Indian products will flood Pakistan is a realistic fear. It is created fear. It's not a real one. And remember, you see, a smaller country always benefits from a larger market rather than a larger market.
Absolutely.
India is really not that interested in having a larger market. Remember that in 2003 and afterwards, India started to expand out of the region towards Asia and towards the Middle East because they felt that this is a small region as far as they're concerned. They will benefit, but not as much as Pakistan. Strategically speaking, of course, there'll be benefits for India as well and for the region itself. Point really that boils down to is, and this is something that I would very much like to talk about, is, look, the glass is half full.
Right.
I'm not saying it's half empty. It's half full, and it can be full. Take certain measures which are essential, where regionalization of growth is just one factor, where opening up trade with India and elsewhere will benefit. I think a more important consideration is not that. The more important consideration is look at ourselves. What is it we can do and are not doing? Why are we allowing political gridlock to keep us from taking the right measures, which are easy to take? Take the case of, for example, energy. If you resolve the energy problem today, your growth can double in 1 year, from 3% to 6%. If you take other measures, complementary measures with it, there will be a dramatic improvement in macroeconomics. If you reduce or eliminate energy problem today, your macroeconomic position improves. With that, growth improves, returns on investment improve, savings increase, investment goes up. It's a win-win situation.
Problem.
Yes.
Yeah, and so we're coming towards the end of our program. We haven't even touched the surface, scratched the surface yet. But let's ask our guest in Karachi, do you think the government's anywhere close to resolving the energy issue?
I think the energy issue is an issue which needs collective efforts from everybody, the private sector, the government. People have to let go of the past. Ayesha, we've stayed in the past for too long. We want to hold on to what the structures, the economic structures used to be 10, 20, 30 years ago. And they were very successful for a certain class of people. Unfortunately, if the energy situation needs to be solved,
I'm interrupting you because
the subsidies, government has to cut subsidies.
No, Asif, I'm interrupting you because we're really towards the end of the show. And I have a very quick question that if you guys can answer in 30 seconds. In any other market, it would seem like you have electricity for like 20 out of 24 hours. There'd be solar-powered companies all over. Why aren't they in Pakistan, Mr. Iqbal?
Initial cost is very high,
okay,
and the returns are uncertain. And that's the reason why it will have to take time before conditions settle down and sustainable growth takes place.
Quickly, Asif, very quickly, why aren't we seeing solar or other growth in Pakistan?
I think Dr. Zubair is right. It's very expensive, and Pakistan will probably take time to be able to afford these things. So we have to rely on gas, we have to rely on hydro, we have to rely on the cheapest forms of energy possible.
Coal, and we have to get rid of our circular debt so that at least the capacity that Pakistan has, it can use. That brings us to the end of this program. We were talking about the loss of foreign direct investment in Pakistan. Apparently, we have found from both our experts that the glass is not just empty, it is half full, it can be full, and the things that can take it to full are not that hard to do. Energy crisis, for example, can be solved and the growth can be doubled. I want to thank both our guests before we say goodbye. Dr. Zubair Iqbal, who's always very kind to us and joins us here, and Mr. Asif Saad, who at a very short notice decided to join us. Mr. Saad, thank you very much, and we hope to have you in our future programs. On behalf of the Access Point team, I want you to thank you for watching and joining us. Make sure you leave your comments about this show and your suggestions about our future shows. Thank you and good night.
It shouldn't be a surprise at all. Let me get through the axioms that determine foreign direct investment in any country. Foreign direct investment is a function of several things. One of the most important ones is the rate of growth. Higher the growth rate, the more the foreign direct investment inflow. Similarly, if better the external position, more you would have a foreign direct investment coming into the country. Third, depends upon the domestic policy stance. If the domestic policy stance is friendly, yes, capital inflows will move in. And the fourth, which is very interesting for developing countries in particular, if foreign assistance, official foreign assistance is increasing, then foreign direct investment also increases. Now, as far as Pakistan is concerned, it does not meet any of the characteristics or inputs that are required to promote foreign direct investment. Growth is not picking up. In fact, at this moment, growth is at 3%, which is somewhat 4 percentage points below the potential rate of growth. Its external position is incredibly bad, which means that no investor would be willing to come in.
Okay, so you're describing all the problems that we already know.
Yes.
Security is bad. Welcome to your access point to Washington. I'm Ayesha Tanzeem. Foreign direct investment fell by a whopping 67% during the first quarter of the new fiscal year in Pakistan. Why are dollars and euros running away from Pakistan? And how do we stop them in their tracks? We'll find out from a panel of experts that include in our Washington studios Dr. Zubair Iqbal of the Middle East Institute, who's the former IMF Assistant Director of the Middle East and Central Asia. We also have from Karachi via Skype Mr. Asif Saad, the CEO of a Korean conglomerate, Lotte. They have invested big time in Pakistan and they're still looking for more. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
We start with you. Well, welcome, Asad, and we start with you, Mr. Iqbal. Why such a big drop? 67. That growth is bad. We've had, floods. We haven't recovered, etc., etc., etc. And yet we have you here, Asad, Mr. Asad, who's I'm sorry, Mr. Saad. I don't know why I messed up. You belong to a company.
It's Asif Saad.
Yes, Asif Saad. And you're working with a company that's investing in Pakistan and wanting to invest more. What is it that you think happening in the economy that you guys want to be there and the others don't?
I think it's not a case of the others don't. I think if you want to evaluate Pakistan's investment climate and regime at this point, you have to look at what has been the background of the country and what kind of situation it has faced in the past and where we are today. I think purely as an investor, as a foreign investor in Pakistan, our group looks at some key fundamentals, and those fundamentals have to do with the demographics of the country, the location, the geopolitical location, the fact that it has a young population, it's a growing population, the fact that there is so all these things actually bode well for the future, and anybody who is looking to invest today and is going to be there as a long-term player can reap the results when the country goes through this evolution and finally comes out of its trouble spots which we see today. So I think nobody's running away from Pakistan. It's the fact is that international companies like ourselves, both European, Asian, if you look at their returns of investment and you compare it, because it's all relative, you compare it to the region and see the return of investments available in countries like India, in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, Pakistan is not far behind. In fact, I won't be surprised if Pakistan is actually is a little better than some of these countries.
So that's an argument.
If the returns,
yes, Asif Saad, Mr. Saad, that's an argument I often hear from successful businessmen in Pakistan like that. And I want to ask Dr. Iqbal, where is then this gap? On one side, you say nothing is working. And on the other side, we have successful businesses who want to invest more in Pakistan, not just Pakistani money, Korean money, the the reals, there are the euros, there are the dollars. Why is the equation not matching?
Well, see, looking at the micro level, yes, there can be some isolated cases of success stories which will attract investments from abroad because there is a particular function to be performed by that. However, if you're looking at it from a macro point of view, the overall of the economy, it doesn't bode well for various reasons. See, one of the most important axioms underlying foreign direct investment is that foreign direct investment goes only to the countries where domestic investment is rising. If domestic investment is not rising, no foreign investor is likely to go there in big number, especially in a sustained fashion. That's not happening in Pakistan. I agree that there are certain isolated areas where it is possible,